Once you start talking.
Okay.
Well, good morning. My name is Bryant Dunaway. I am the District Attorney General for the 13th Judicial District of Tennessee. And that's, I'll explain what that kind of means in a minute. But good morning from Cookeville and the campus of Tennessee Tech University, which is my alma mater. So I'm always glad to be here on campus and reminisce the memories that I've had here. It's a great campus and great university. And I'm always grateful that Boise State is hosted by Tennessee Tech. They do a great job, and I'm glad to be with you this morning. So as we go along, let me just explain, just give you a 60,000 foot view of what I do and what my role is. And I'm going to need some technical assistance because it's not advancing. Sorry. I hit enter?
No.
Oh.
Forward arrow.
Yeah, it's not working.
Yeah. Well, what about the mouse? I'm just going to do this.
Stand by. I don't.
There we go.
Space
There we
bar.
go.
Oh, space bar.
Space bar.
Space bar.
Okay.
That's even easier. So what you're seeing on your screen right now is a map of the state of Tennessee. All of you are from all over the state. You might find your home county in one of these color clusters. But what you have here is a map of Tennessee, and the color clusters are the various judicial districts in Tennessee. The state of Tennessee is divided into judicial districts when it comes to the organization of the court system. And so I am the elected district attorney for the 13th Judicial District, and you'll find it about the middle of the state toward the top in a yellow cluster of 7 counties. It's the largest district in the state of Tennessee. And my role as the district attorney in simplistic terms is really, I'm the chief law enforcement officer for those 7 counties. I prosecute all criminal cases in those 7 counties. So any crime that's charged in the whole district, from all police departments, sheriff's departments, and all other law enforcement agencies like the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, THP, everything comes through my office in those 7 counties of the 13th Judicial District. And you'll see that some of the districts are not the same size. There's no rhyme or reason of how they're organized. There's no logic to them either. You might notice that some of you may be from Coffee County. Down there, my friend Craig Northcott's the DA in Coffee County, and it's a district all to itself, even though it's a county of about 50,000 people. So that's just an example of how the districts are not drawn with any logic. But it works, and we're glad to keep it that way. So as we begin, we're going to talk today about sexting, cyberbullying, and just general digital citizenship. And this is sometimes not a fun topic to talk about. It makes people sometimes feel a little awkward, but it's reality. More and more, my job every day, I deal with issues and problems that deal with digital data that's transferred by mobile devices, cell phone devices, computers, tablets. You all have grown up in that world. I didn't when I was younger. In fact, I graduated from Tennessee Tech without ever having turned a computer on, if that's believable. I think we got the internet in my senior year. I knew what the internet was. I heard the word internet, but didn't really know what it was.
Right.
But the world's changed. And so with all the criminal cases that my office deals with, there's rarely a case that does not deal with digital evidence, what I call digital evidence, which is, data from cell phones and computers and from, Facebook and Instagram and Snapchat. More and more people of your generation don't use traditional texting. They communicate, as you know, through Snapchat messaging and that type of thing. So all of that digital data is used to transmit messages and photos and communicate in many ways. And so sometimes those communications, depending on the nature of them, cause problems. So let's talk a little bit about that. And remember, campus policies, university policies, and also your high school policies all address, inappropriate use of cameras, imaging, and digital devices is generally prohibited, including the use of devices in areas where privacy is expected by participants. It is against the law to take photographs of persons when they're in an area, in a place where they have an expectation of privacy. So just keep that in mind and be very careful. Let's talk about the hard information. So I've got a list on the screen here. Category of criminal offenses that we categorize under the umbrella of internet crimes against children. And there's several statutes listed there. The numbers you see on the left are statute references, and and the right side kind of is a brief description of each one of those criminal offenses. We call them the ICAC statutes, Internet Crimes Against Children. I have 17 prosecutors in my office, including myself, and 2 of them, all they do, the only type of work that they prosecute is sexual crimes against children, which being obviously people under the age of 18. And these 4 statutes are ones that are often dealt with. And every law enforcement agency has investigators that this is the only types of crimes that they deal with. That tells you that there's quite a bit of it, which is kind of a shame, really. So solicitation of a minor, generally speaking, what that is when it is against the law for an adult, somebody over the age of 18, to request, solicit in any way through text messaging, verbally, in person, for a person under the age of 18 to engage in any type of sexual activity that would ordinarily be unlawful if the act was actually committed. The next one you see there, solicitation of a minor by electronic means. We see that a lot of times with web cameras. That's a big thing now. We're on one now. That's commonplace in this world today. And you can't solicit a minor for doing any kind of sexual activity if you're an adult by the use of webcams, cell phones, or anything like that. And solicitation is just requesting that they perform things that they shouldn't. The next offense you see on the screen is confuses people just a little bit. The title of the offense is sexual exploitation of a minor, but commonly known as possession of child pornography. And so that's what you would understand it to be. Sexual exploitation of a minor is the possession of child pornography. Now, how has that become a real problem for us in the work that we do when we deal with teenagers and even middle schoolers? It is against the law for any person to be in possession of an image of a sexual nature of a person that's under the age of 18. So let's just talk frankly for a minute. Many teenagers use not good judgment sometimes. And for example, you might have a young man or a young lady snap a picture of themselves and transmit that to somebody else by text message or Snapchat. And they may be in an undressed or different, doing other things. And the person who receives that is breaking the law by being in possession of child pornography and are subject to being charged with a crime if they're caught in possession of that. And while in the mind, that's a little scary, you can get yourself in a situation that you don't really intend to, because as boyfriends or girlfriends, I know this happens all the time, will sometimes inappropriately exchange photos like that. And if they are found to be in somebody's possession, it's a crime just to possess them. The last offense you see listed on the screen is called aggravated sexual exploitation of a minor. And in plain language, what that means really is it is against the law to distribute child pornography. So this also happens quite a bit with teenagers and middle schoolers, unfortunately. That picture that I described that was sent to you by some other student, you now decide that it's appropriate, when it's not, to forward it on to somebody else because you think somebody else will want to see it. Well, you have now distributed what by definition is child pornography to somebody else. And that is a much more serious offense than just the possession of child pornography. So you can kind of see how using poor judgment with the technology that's available to us today can really get you in a mess. Let's talk a little bit more about solicitation and kind of describe it a little bit better. So the solicitation of a minor has to be done by an adult. It has to be by electronic communication. That you can imagine what all that is. I've already described that. It requests a minor, or here's the way we catch people sometimes doing this. It's an offense if you request a minor to do something sexual that they shouldn't do. And sometimes we use law enforcement officers to pose as minors to catch the person who is the creep, right? We're trying to catch the creep. We'll have law enforcement officers pose as minors online sometimes and also sometimes in person. And it is still an offense if a person solicits a law enforcement officer if they believe them to be a minor. So just because they're not really a minor doesn't excuse the fact they're still trying. That's the intent of what they're trying to do. And they're trying to solicit or request that a minor to engage in sexual activity, and there is no defense if the solicitation even is unsuccessful. Even if the child or the minor says, no, I'm not doing that, the offense is has still been committed just by requesting that. So that's just a little description of the solicitation. Taking it one step further, solicitation of a minor by electronic means. It's also performed by an adult. The solicitation is done by an adult, soliciting somebody under 18 by the use of electronic communication, but it causes a minor to actually engage in sexual activity. So that in this offense, the child actually does what is requested, or the offender engages in sexual activity in view of the minor. That sometimes happens in the context of webcam communication, where the adult is doing inappropriate things where the minor can view those things. That is also a very serious criminal offense. So let's talk about, when I say serious criminal offense, let me give you an idea of what I mean by that. So punishment on conviction. The level of offenses ranges from A, misdemeanors, which is the misdemeanor is any offense that is where you can get a year or less in jail, to a B felony, which a B felony can get you up to 8 to 12 years in prison. So the sentences on the things I've described range from those two possibilities. Sentences range from a year in jail or 11 months, 29 days to 8 to 12 years in prison. And the level of the offense and the range of punishment depends on what act was solicited. Sexual exploitation of a minor. Remember, this is possession of child pornography. And so the seriousness of that offense depends on how many images that the person possesses. So a person can be charged with possession of just a single image of a child in a sexual context. But if it's under 50 images, then it's a D felony, which is a 2 to 4 year sentence, is the possibility. If there's over 50 images, it's a C felony, which is 1 grade higher. The possibility of punishment is 3 to 6 year sentence. And if a person is in possession of over 100 images, it's a B felony, which could carry an 8 to 12 year sentence at 100%. So there's no parole. You're going to spend 8 to 12 years day for day in prison. Interestingly, when we try these cases, the images are of children that we can't identify. You know, we don't know who that child is, but we're not required to prove who they are. All we have to do is establish that it is a child under the age of 18. Aggravated sexual exploitation of a minor. That's we talked about that a minute ago. That's the distribution of child pornography. When you have forwarded on to somebody else or made a copy of it in any way, you promote, sell, transport, or purchase, or possess with the intent to do one of those things. That offense starts with a C felony, possibility of 3 to 6 years when it's less than 25 images, or a B felony, 8 to 12 years at 100% if it's greater than 25 images, if you've distributed 25 images or more. Especially aggravated sexual exploitation of minor, that's engaging in the production of child pornography. And you might think, oh, who in the world does that? Well, it happens all the time. And we even have prosecuted cases locally where that unfortunately happens. And that's a serious offense too, a B felony, 8 to 12 year sentence at 100%, day for day, no parole. Now, you might say, well, what are the consequences if I find myself convicted of a felony offense? Any of the things that we've talked about today can be a felony offense. So you lose your citizenship rights. If you're convicted of a felony conviction, any felony conviction, you lose the right to vote, which all of you are participating in that process during Boys State today and exercise your constitution. You're going through the role of exercising those rights as you go through your elections. You lose the right to hold public office if you're a convicted felon. You lose the right to serve on a jury, the loss of your right to possess a firearm. And in the context of these ICAC crimes, internet crimes against children, you are often placed on the sex offender registration list, which is published on the internet, and everybody can look it up and see that you've been convicted of a sexual type offense. So that just gives you the things we've talked about thus far, just giving you some background on what are the consequences for some of these crimes that can be committed, sometimes without really thinking about it, by the use of electronic devices. Well, one of the other things that we see quite a bit that is done by young people and even older people with electronic devices is something we call sexting. I know you've heard about it, but is it really that big of a deal? Yes, it really is. The state of Tennessee considers sexting photos to be child pornography. That's why I gave you this discussion background of child pornography. It's a topic we don't like to talk about, but when you're a young person and you make the bad decision or poor decision to send messages to a friend or that are of a sexual nature, I don't think you realize that you are creating child pornography or distributing it, but that's actually what you're doing or what an individual is doing. Most of you have more sense to do that. But you're creating and distributing child pornography by sexting if you have created a digital image. And can you get in trouble? Yes. Any person under the age of 18 who takes a photo, any person who distributes a photo of a person under the age of 18, and any person who possesses a photo of a person under the age of 18, you have committed these offenses we've talked about. So why does it happen? Why are young people tempted to do such things? Well, he or she wants the person to like them. They've got a new boyfriend or girlfriend, and the flirtations start, and then the requests begin, and they one or the other is just enamored and wants the other person to like them, and everybody does it. So what's the harm? He or she thought they would be popular. There's peer pressure to produce and take such images and send them. They just wanted to try it one time, and then the dynamic of sending messages by phone and computer it's a weird dynamic because you have a false sense of being private. You're in your own house, maybe you're in a room by yourself, and you take this photo and you send it, and it doesn't feel like anybody else is around, but you know that once you hit send, it hits the internet and it is no longer private by any means. So how do people find out about these images that may get sent, or messages? Inadvertently. The phone gets left in the cafeteria, a boyfriend or girlfriend forwards the photo, and you know that happens. Anytime you send it, it's going to be forwarded. His or her teacher takes the phone and finds the photo. A brother and sister uses the phone. Police officer gets a search warrant for a phone. All of those things are possible, just ways that those images can be detected. The other thing, and I don't have a slide for it, but I'll tell you the major technology companies like Google and Facebook and the big technology companies, they participate in the ICAC system, Internet Crimes Against Children. And Google, for example, if there's an image that goes across the internet that is detected, it's flagged for being possibly child pornography, they send law enforcement a tip. And we get that, and then we begin an investigation. And then with following the IP addresses, we can track to where that image came from, what computer it was sent from, what physical location the computer was at, and we often find the actual person through that breadcrumb trail of who actually sent the image. So when you send something, the material that is sent across the internet is being watched by lots of people. It's not private by any means. So what happens if you're caught? You can be charged with these crimes we've talked about. And then there's collateral damage, loss of college scholarships. Possibly you'll have to register as a sex offender. Remember, folks, the photo never goes away. When you send an image on a cell phone or any device that's internet connected, it never goes away. It can pop up years later when you least expect it. You're going to experience potentially humiliation, bullying, blackmail, school discipline, police involvement. And the NCMEC stands for, we call it NCMEC. That's the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. That's the organization that sends law enforcement the tips for possible child exploitation that we follow up on. And let me give you a real example. So Philip Alpert, he's an example of an 18-year-old teenager. This is not a made-up person. It's real. He's a Florida teenager, and he was placed on the public sex offender registry for forwarding sexting images of his 16-year-old girlfriend to third parties after an argument between the couple. So he and his girlfriend get in an argument. He wants to get back at her. He has a picture of her that's topless, And so he sends it and forwards it around to everybody in an effort to embarrass her. Well, what happened to Albert? He got charged and convicted of a criminal offense. He's a felon. He's now on the sex offender registry for at least 25 years in the state of Florida. There are examples just like this in Tennessee as well, but I chose not to use a Tennessee example because I don't want to, you may know some. I pulled Philip from Florida. There's a real example of a person who didn't intend to distribute child pornography, but was charged and convicted of doing that. So what if you are solicited? Tell somebody, tell a teacher, tell a parent, talk to your SRO. If you're at high school, educate your friends about it, and please be part of the solution and not the problem. Don't take images of yourself. Never take images of yourself. And that really sounds like common sense, and most of us have it, but there's a lot that don't. And we have lapses in judgment sometimes. But don't take images of yourself that you wouldn't be proud for your mom to see on a billboard on the main highway in your hometown. Don't take any image you wouldn't be proud for it to be there on the billboard. Don't forward anyone else's images. If somebody inadvertently sends you an image that you recognize as inappropriate, please make that aware. Do them a favor and make some teacher or authority figure aware that that's been received by you. And for heaven's sakes, don't copy it or forward it on in any other way, because that in and of itself is an offense, and we don't want you to get yourself in trouble. You won't get in any trouble if you inadvertently receive an image and you report it appropriately. Don't ask or pressure anyone to share an image, and stay in control. I want to make you aware, too, that there's mandatory reporting statutes. I've referred the statute there, 37-1605, as a reference to a Tennessee law that requires, the law requires that people report suspected child abuse, apparent child sexual abuse, and child sexual abuse. If you come into knowledge, somebody reports it to you, or you observe suspected child abuse in any way, you have a legal obligation to report it. You can't just say, I'm going to stay out of it. You have to. And I've charged people, most of the times when that's happened, it's been somebody who's been in a position of authority and they didn't report it and they should have known better. I've charged them with the offense of violating the mandatory reporting statute. So there's telephone numbers to the Department of Children's Services, or you can just call your police department, or if you're at school, you can report it by telling your SRO. And it's a criminal offense for knowingly and willingly failing to report suspected child abuse. So we talked about some sexting. Cyberbullying is another issue that happens with young people. It happened. You've seen news stories about it on TV. Cyberbullying is what? What is it? What do we mean by that? It means posting comments online. I see this all the time by adults even. They're sometimes the worst culprits. When you have platforms like Facebook and Twitter, you'll see very cruel things said to others. That can be cyberbullying. Any type of posting, mean comments online, creating hate groups about someone else, using Photoshop to put somebody's head on an embarrassing context, recording and posting fights, video fights. I know that happens at high schools. You have fights and everybody stands around their cell phone and records the fight and posts it on Instagram and everything else. Those can be used as a tool for bullying or embarrassment of students. Spreading rumors and gossip through text messages and stealing someone's identity to create a fake profile. Those things are all examples of cyberbullying, which can include harassment. Harassment is a specific criminal offense. The statute's listed there. Harassment can be accomplished by using electronic means, text messaging, emails, internet services, and it involves one or more calls. It can be as few as that are communicated to somebody else with no legitimate purpose, and the intent is to annoy or alarm the other person. It can be accomplished by displaying of an image that's threatening harm. And the possible punishment for harassment is an A misdemeanor, punishable by 1129 means 11 months and 29 days. It's 1 day short of a year, and a $2,500 fine. So unfortunately, what if you're a victim of cyberbullying, sexting? What are the things that you do? And a lot of these are common sense, but they're worth repeating. Don't respond to the message. Block the bully or the aggressive, mean person. Block them on your your device or your social media platform. One very important thing is do not delete the messages. If you have somebody who is sending you inappropriate sexual messages or asking you to engage in sexual conduct or sending you inappropriate material, do not delete it. When you report that, we want to preserve that information, preserve those images by law enforcement so that we can try to track down the offender and hold them accountable. Set up new accounts if you've got some traffic, inappropriate traffic coming to your existing accounts. Make a report and talk to an adult. What should I do? Don't encourage bullying behavior. Don't participate. Just fit in. Don't succumb to peer pressure. Stand up for the victim. Be courageous enough to stand up for the person who can't defend themselves and report it. Keep critical comments to yourself. Don't forward rumors, embarrassing photos. Don't comment on insulting or embarrassing posts, and treat others with respect. So why? We've all heard instances that sometimes cyberbullying and texting gets so bad and so emotionally wrecked, it so emotionally wrecks the victim, especially young people, that they really get into some real emotional trouble that gets their mind going to other things. And I'll tell you, Tennessee is probably 4 times the suicide rate of the national rate. It's very high in Tennessee. It's higher than the national rate, the suicide rate. And we've had instances of young people in response to bullying and in very embarrassing images being released that they have committed suicide. And you'll see that there's 44 on the screen. You'll see 4,400 deaths per year, according to the CDC. And bullying victims are 2 to 9 times more likely to consider suicide than non-victims, according to studies. So it's a real concern. The internet is forever. If you don't walk away with any other message today besides that, you need to really let that sink in. The internet is forever. When you leave that message, I don't care what it is, a text message, when you make a social media post, even though you delete something off of Instagram, it's not gone. It's always there. In law enforcement, we obtain information and data directly from companies like Instagram and Facebook and Twitter and all of those social media platforms. They keep all of that data on their servers, even though it's deleted from view on your account. It's not gone forever. So every photo, every text message, every post is still available to us, and we can access it with a search warrant. When I say us, I mean law enforcement if there's an investigation. So if those photos are out there, they can pop up years later. Somebody has control of them, and that somebody is not you. So once on the internet, it's always forever in existence. So when you have a tendency to do pranks and party pics and nude selfies and documenting poor decision making, all of that is proof of criminal activity that you're creating. So here's other consequences. I'll speak for myself. When I have 53 people who work for me, and for the past 20 something years, I've had people work for me. And when I have an applicant for somebody who wants a job with my organization, the district attorney's office, the first thing I do is look them up on social media. They may have a glowing and impressive resume. They may have a wonderful degree with straight A's, but if they've got a bunch of nonsense on their Instagram page or Facebook page, they're not going to work for me. It displays poor judgment. And I think most employers are that way now. I think some colleges will look at your social media platforms when they are looking, deciding whether they're going to offer you scholarships or things. So it is a way that we check you out. Employers check you out. Colleges check you out. Sports eligibility can be affected if you're an athlete. And so that list goes on and on. Social media has become really an element of all background checks really in today's world. So don't put anything on your social media page that you wouldn't be proud for your parents to see. And the list goes on. So that's really the end of my presentation. Do you have questions that have you got some flowing in?
Yeah,
I know it's gone a little faster since we're sitting in a room by ourselves. It's a little awkward. Go ahead. What do we have?
So one of the questions is, what happens if unsolicited, an 18-year-old receives something from a minor? Would they still be charged?
So if I understand the question correctly, if an adult received unsolicited an inappropriate image from a minor, would they be charged? No, if you immediately reported that image, okay? And it's very important that you do not forward it by email to someone else, that you don't copy it, that you don't save it anywhere else. If you received it on your phone through a text message, just take your phone to the police department and show them in that context. You would not be charged with a crime. You would be taking appropriate action to report it, and you didn't intentionally possess it. As soon as you realized you possessed it, well, you did the right thing. So there wouldn't be any charges in there.
What if they just deleted?
So you could just delete it, but we would prefer you not to, because, let's put this in context. If I have a 14-year-old young lady who has made a bad decision and taken a picture of herself in a state of undress, and she has sent that picture to somebody, am I going to charge her with possession of pornography or sending pornography? Probably not. But we do want to reach out to that young lady and impress upon her the seriousness of what she's done. And sometimes the boys do it too. It's equal on both sides. But the danger is you'll have grooming, what we call grooming. You'll have really creepy adults who will pose as young people and try to establish relationships with with children online through social media, and kind of groom them into a relationship with the goal of enticing inappropriate sexual behavior or contact. So it's really important to not delete it wouldn't be illegal to delete it, but it's good not to delete it and report it to law enforcement right away, so that we can make a decision as to what needs to be done about it, if anything. If it's an innocent mistake and a bad decision by a young person, oftentimes we talk to parents and that's the end of it. But if we recognize that it's a problem, then we want to do something about it to hold them accountable.
So then another person asked if Romeo and Juliet laws apply to any of this. So we've got an 18-year-old boyfriend, 17-year-old girlfriend, pictures are exchanged.
Yeah.
Does that apply at all?
So that's the difficult situation. I've never heard referred to as Romeo and Juliet laws, but the law is the challenge with these laws that we've talked about today is there are no exceptions. It talks about a person 18 and over being in possession of images of a person that's under the age of 18. And even though those two people may be 6 months apart, if the 18-year-old has solicited the 17-year-old, it's by definition a crime. Now, am I going to, in that context, we all have reasonable heads, and I wouldn't charge somebody with solicitation of a minor in that context, but it is, it fits the definition. It certainly does. But that type of thing doesn't happen really. But the images are a problem. I mean, the images concern me more than the relationship. Anytime there's images created, they're going to be distributed. It's almost never that they're not distributed. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I hope so.
If someone takes an explicit photo and photoshops my face on it, can I be incriminated?
Yeah. Well, that would be a crime by the person who did the photoshopping. That could be considered cyberbullying by the person who did the photoshopping, because that's a mean way to cause humiliation and harassment of the person whose head was put on that other body. So yes, that could be a crime. That's certainly inappropriate, and we would want to look into that. That's not really. Somebody might have intended that to be some type of joke, but if it's of a sexual nature, it's not funny.
Are you aware of the Cormega Copening case? He was arrested and charged in North Carolina for having nude photos of himself as a minor whilst never sharing them.
I'm not familiar with that particular case. I'm not from the North Carolina case, but that's the danger too. I mean, a person who makes, in Tennessee anyway, a minor who would make photos of themselves is not necessarily the creation of child pornography, but if they're distributed or possessed by anybody else, it would be for sure. And that's the danger. It's just not good judgment either. But I'm not familiar with that particular case. I'm sorry. I think she's perusing the chat room.
I also want to know if you know anything about the EDP situation. It's a YouTuber that apparently was, someone's going to have to give me a little context on this. Criminal investigation into EDP.
I'm not familiar with EDP. Whoever posted that, give her the,
If someone could ask me a question.
instead of the acronym, tell her what the EDP stands for.
Yeah,
Speak
give me
to
a
it.
little more context if you could.
One of the, while we're waiting, let me know if another question pops up. One of the things that we deal with in the district attorney's office often, and law enforcement does as well, is the grooming by adults of minors for sexual contact. And that begins, I'm always preaching to parents to be watchful of their child's internet activity, because creepy criminal adults who have these inappropriate intentions, they groom and establish relationships with minors often through social media platforms and the internet. They meet in chat rooms and they meet on social media, Instagram and that type of thing. And often it's very easy to create fake profiles and to appear to be a completely different person than you're really talking to. And we had a case in our district right here where that happened, and a young 15-year-old girl agreed to meet this person that it groomed her online, and they picked her up and traveled to another part of the state. And by the time we found her, she had already been forced to engage in prostitution. And that's a real problem. So you always have to be on guard when you're approached online by unknown persons.
So EDP is the name of a YouTuber. Apparently
Okay.
it stands for something that is pretty profane. So they've
I
not put
understand.
that in the chat, and I appreciate them not doing that. He was caught by a third party sending messages to minors. So I believe the controversy here was not the police that caught him. It was kind of a vigilante investigator who caught him.
Yeah, there are some people that are that way. I'm not familiar with that particular person that you may be referring to on YouTube, but that has happened. There are people who just find they're technology savvy, and they find it in their heart that they want to watch out for children. And if they detect inappropriate behavior and detect it online, that they report it and gather that data and deliver that to law enforcement so that a case and a prosecution can be had. That's happened many times. And, it sounds like what you're describing here.
Was a wannabe Chris Hansen, someone
Yeah.
characterized it.
I want to be Chris Hansen did Catch a Predator. Yeah.
Okay, switching gears a bit, one delegate has a question. Is it possible for someone to gain back their privileges after gaining a felony?
So that's a great question. Yes, under many circumstances. So, and there's varying degrees of that. So if you're a convicted felon under Tennessee law and under federal law too, you can, after a certain period of time, after your sentence has expired. So if you were convicted of a crime and your sentence was a 3-year sentence was imposed, 5 years after that 3-year sentence, you can petition the courts to restore what we call restore your civil rights. And your civil rights are what we talked about: the right to vote, the right to hold office, the right to possess a firearm, all of those things that prohibit felons from doing. So at a certain point in your life, and it'll be years that you have to wait, you can petition the courts to have those rights restored to you. So there is a process for that. And then the other situation that's rare, but is sometimes done, is a pardon by either the governor of the state. If your conviction was in state court and the governor of the state has the authority to pardon somebody, if you're pardoned, then you can have your rights restored. Or if you were convicted in federal court, the president of the United States has the right to pardon you, and that process can also restore your rights. But that's a rare occurrence. It's quite common for people to file a petition in court to restore your rights. But it takes years to get to that point. It's a period of years after your sentence expires.
I believe you've already addressed this one, but how many DA investigators work in your office, sir? And he says, I've always been interested in that position and thought it was pretty cool. So how would you obtain a position like yours?
Yeah, that's a great question as well. So I'll say it by giving a little more background. So most criminal offenses are all criminal offenses are investigated by law enforcement investigators, which are employed by police departments and sheriff's departments and Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. The Highway Patrol has investigators. My office specifically most of the function of my office, we prosecute crimes. So once crimes are charged and when they're investigated, my office decides whether or not it's appropriate to charge and prosecute the crimes. That's generally what we do. But I do have on my staff, I have 2 criminal investigators who are not lawyers. They're true investigators, and they carry a caseload, and they investigate crimes, and they're police officers in the full sense of the word. They have arrest powers and all law enforcement powers, and they work on my staff, and they help us. Well, they investigate cases, and they spend most of their time on these types of cases we've talked about today, child sex cases, because there's so many of them. And then they also assist the prosecutors in tracking down witnesses and preparing matters for trial. Now, every district attorney's office has a different number of investigators. If you're in Davidson County, they'll have more on their staff than in my district, or in Memphis, they'll have more. I don't have a lot of investigators on my staff because primarily the district attorney's office is engaged in prosecution, but we all have some number of investigators that have police power on our staff.
And how would they get a position with your?
So how do you get a position? So you would apply. You know, the investigators that I've hired have been previous investigators at other law enforcement agencies. Both of my investigators were detectives at sheriff's departments in the past, and I sent them. They graduated from the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation Criminal Academy, Investigators Academy. So you would just apply for those positions as they come. Now, you're not going to get one right out of college working for a DA's office. Those investigator positions are likely going to be hired from somebody who has some investigation experience and has worked in law enforcement with another agency first.
That's our time.
That's a great question.
Great question.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me. And I know it's a little different watching on the TV. It's different for me to talk to you on TV too, but I appreciate your time and thank you for having me. Yes.